There we go. And welcome to those of you now joining us on YouTube after the webinar as well. My name is Jamie Viebach, and I am the Will County Director for the Conservation Foundation. Just so that you know, first of all, everybody is muted because this is a webinar format. So you're muted, your cameras are off. If you're joining us in your pajamas, no judgment here. We can't see you anyway. So this webinar will be recorded for everyone to enjoy later. It'll be stored with all of our other past recordings on our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, search the Conservation Foundation, and you will find all of our fantastic webinars, and not just the ones that I've done, but all of the webinars and other little videos and things that we put out. So lots of really great information there. If you have a question during the webinar today, please use the Q&A box. That lets everybody else see your questions. It also makes it easier for us to find them all at the end. Sometimes the questions can get lost in chat if there's a lot of people making comments in there. So that Q&A box is the easiest place to ask your questions. And we'll make sure to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the presentation. For your safety, you should only be able to see what I post in chat, but just in case I missed a setting or something, please don't click links other than what Marta or I might post. On the Conservation Foundation side, these webinars are offered to the public for free, but we do encourage you to consider a donation or a membership. The more people we have attending, the more it does cost us to run them. So at the end of the webinar, you're going to be taken to a page with a bunch of different resources that we offer through the Conservation Foundation, along with our virtual tip jar. There's a little button on there that you can click to become a member. In addition to your donation, there's no extra charge, but you can make it just making a one-time donation or make a donation that will make you a member. Both of those are options. So if you're enjoying these webinars, I do encourage you to donate. That helps to keep us running. It also makes you a member so that you can enjoy our wide variety of members-only stuff. Those of you who have joined us before know that this has been an ongoing series. So Wednesdays, we started doing them Wednesdays in August, off of our Monday, Thursday format that we had before, but we're going to be going forward for the near future. I've been scheduling them all up. I've got some really, really good ones waiting for you in the wings, so stay tuned. Next week's on August 26th. How is it August 26th already? Next week is going to be nature photography. We're going to be joined by our own Leah from the Conservation Foundation, who is a fabulous photographer. She's the one who takes a lot of those really great photos you see on our Facebook page. She's going to be talking all about nature photography. So I'm really looking forward to that one. But boy, I'm telling you, I've got all kinds of great things scheduled. We have a raptor guy coming up. He's going to have live birds on our webinar. I'm so excited. They're not going to be in the same room with me, but you will have a chance to see some live raptors too. We're also going to be talking about naturalizing pond shorelines. We're going to be talking about oak trees. We got all kinds of great stuff coming up for you. So with that, stay tuned. But now I'm going to turn it over. Marta, if you would turn your camera on. There you are, Marta. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to you now to take it away.
All right, and I'm going to try to share my screen with the video. I want to thank everybody for coming today, and thank the Conservation Foundation especially for asking me about doing this and offering to host this. You guys have quite the following, so I know we're reaching folks we wouldn't reach if we were just on our own. I did want to let you know that I'm going to be trying to do this mainly from a state of Illinois perspective. There's going to be some Will County specific items, but really it's, when we're talking about recycling, we're talking about it on a larger scale than just obviously our local. So the state has some things they've been working on, and then the global impacts that we see. So for the last few years, there's been some serious changes to recycling. There's been some scary headlines. And as someone with over 30 years experience in the recycling industry, I can honestly say that change is absolutely nothing new to us. And it ebbs and flows with both exciting and frightening headlines from time to time. All right, now if I get my slide to show. I can't get my next slide to come down here. There we go. All right, figured that out. Sorry about that, guys. So just to give you an idea, today I'm going to be doing a brief history of the recycling. It kind of helps you figure out how we got to where we are today. And then also just going over a little tiny bit on the impact of COVID, because you know we have to talk about COVID, right? And then touch a little bit on the commercial sector of recycling, which does touch any of us who are out there working and recycling at work. And then take my hand at maybe a little fortune telling for you at the end. So I look forward to Jamie helping me at the end with any questions you guys have. Put them in the chat and we will get to everything, I promise. I just, if you don't mind, wanted to try to flow through some of this history with you. In Will County, we have a community called Crete, and it is home to the longest operated and running recycling drop-off in the state of Illinois, so we're quite proud. And it's run by the Crete Lions Club, basically since the beginning of World War II. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware that the US EPA was created in 1970, and that same year there was a Earth Day event. So there was environmental awareness, which basically led to recycling drop-off being formed in Naperville. And that was in 1973. And it was formed by a group that ended up becoming known as NARC, Naperville Area Recycling Center. And basically, by 1980, the city of Naperville started to help fund a CURBSIDE program. And it kind of started from the residents. They would just talk to one another and say, hey, I'm running over, you want me to take anything? And this was going on all over the community, kind of like this do-it-yourself curbside program with your neighbors. And the city actually started paying NARC to do that. And so then that became the very first curbside collection program in the state of Illinois. And that was around 1980. I don't know. I'd have to look it back up, but very early 80s. And the NARC site ended up being on a City of Naperville site. And so just so you're aware, we share Naperville with DuPage County. 2/3 of Naperville is in DuPage, and the original NARC sites are in the DuPage County side. But since 1/3 of Naperville is in Will, we always mention it because we like to show our support of curbside recycling from the beginning. It wasn't until 1989 that there was a law passed in the state of Illinois pretty much saying that all the counties needed to start having solid waste plans and they had to include recycling in them. So the 1990s became quite the time for curbside recycling to really take off. And most of the communities, especially around the Chicagoland area, adopted curbside programs throughout the 90s. There was just a few basic items that were taken. There was a lot of sorting that was required. People were given a bin that was about 1.5 feet tall, and it was wide open. So there was a lot of litter complaints on windy days. People were instructed to put their glass bottles, of which we had a lot of back then, on top of their paper. And that was another thing, newspaper. We had a lot of newspaper back then. Most homes were getting a daily paper, and then if you were in a fluid community, you might see somebody getting 3 newspapers a day. So it was not uncommon back then for people to be very well read with their newspaper. Certainly times have changed a great deal. So by 2000, and the other thing I should mention before we move on to 2000 is that open top bin. It actually was quite easy for the driver who was jumping out to see if you'd put something in there you shouldn't have and leave it for you, giving you instant information. When you'd get home or come back out to retrieve the bin, you're, oh, we didn't take this, darn, I must have made a mistake. And so instant education, okay? Then in the 2000s, we moved to a single stream system where you didn't have to sort as many recyclables. Everything went into the same container in the truck. Paper, bottles, cans, plastic, everything was going in. And we started expanding the list of items that we could take. So one of the ways that they were able to empty these larger carts was to put an arm on the truck. And so the arm comes out, grabs the cart and dumps that cart, and the driver doesn't know that you put something in there that you weren't supposed to. And so off it goes to the MRF. Now, I will say that this meant less injuries to the driver because, after party, a lot of glass bottles can be quite heavy to lift up from a bin. So there were a lot of back injuries, and it's a very significant issue for the waste hauling industry. But at the same time, you lost that educational feedback. So now if you threw something in the cart and you're like, yeah, I think that's recyclable, nobody told you were wrong, okay? So the evolution of recycling continues, and there's new terms and new goals that are coming out. California led the way, calling for a thing called zero waste, okay, where we weren't going to throw anything in the landfill anymore, and they still have that goal, and there's been many others that have been adopting it. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Plastic containers. We pretty much were telling people that they could do any plastic containers except number 6, which is styrofoam. Food scrap composting first became known in the 2000s. Electronic recycling was starting to happen. Construction and demolition recycling was becoming more commonplace. And a term called circular economy, the idea that we didn't just send everything in a linear way right to the landfill when we were done using it, but would somehow bring it back and use it again. But by 2013, we started to see the impact that Asia was having on us. And so there was a thing called the green fence. And basically Asia, who'd been taking a lot of plastics and paper from around the world, not just the US, they came back and they said, we're seeing a lot of trouble with some of this stuff. It's contaminated. And so we'd like you guys to clean it up. And there was some pushback where people that were sending our material recovery facilities were sending our material over to China. China was rejecting it. Now they had all the cost of getting it there, plus the cost of bringing it back. Or they had to pay to send it to some other Asian nation that was willing to accept it, knowing that it didn't meet China's restrictions. Now, I will say that this particular emphasis was not consistent. And so we heard things 2015, it was kind of locking down a little bit more and then letting go again. And then in 2017, the Chinese government came forward and they said, look, we're just not going to take the garbage from the world anymore. We're putting in place the green sword, and our new contamination rate is going to be less than 1% of a 2,000 pound bale of material. And this was huge. This was massive. This was lower than the standards in our own domestic markets for things. It put shockwaves and it caused a glut of material. And it also made us question whether things were truly getting recycled when we sent them to China. So in early 2018, we convened a group in Illinois that consisted of the Illinois EPA, a number of us government folks who are involved in the recycling, the haulers, the companies who are actually servicing you at the curb that take your recycling, and these material recovery facilities who sort all of our materials and then have to try to find markets for them. And we had great participation in this because obviously everybody was suffering this blowback from the Chinese sword. And so we came up with a list that is pretty much across the board. Everybody recycles glass, all right, no ceramics, no vases, no glass, aluminum cans, aluminum foil, bakeware, steel cans, empty aerosols are included in that, paper, clean and dry, cartons, like your orange juice cartons, plastic. We stopped identifying it by the resin code and said, bottles, tubs, and jugs, and just leave it at that. And so it's great as you're getting older. If you haven't tried to read the little chasing arrows, it's good to know you don't have to anymore. It's bottles, tubs, and jugs. Now, the other thing that the task force was able to do was create a list of things nobody wanted, okay? And so that actually became a theme for us, and we've become known as the Contamination Task Force at this point. So just kind of stick with those things that we take and talk about them just a little bit. Glass, the clear glass, is the most valuable glass. To get to that, just for a MRF to market that when it's mixed in with all the other broken glass, it's mixed in with our plastics, it's mixed in with our paper, is difficult. The glass creates a lot of wear and tear on equipment. A MRF has to be designed to take glass out of the mix first. Because they take it out of the mix first, they also are getting a lot of other contaminants in with it. And so they have to do a secondary polishing step in order to even market this. No one will take just the glass from that very first sort. And even when it's polished, they then send it to a secondary glass marketing processor. And they will actually try to sort the glass into colors and market it as those colors. So when I sit here and I tell you the clear glass is the most valuable, please understand that I am not aware of a MRF in the state of Illinois that is actually getting their glass to that clear stage and marketing themselves that way. They are usually breaking even or paying to send it to that secondary glass processor, right? Just to kind of give you a little bit of info on that. Now, the thing with glass to remember is that it is infinitely recyclable. Most glass items do have recycled content. It could have higher recycled content than it currently has if we were to recover more of the glass. We just don't actually recover enough to make 100% or 95% or even 85% recycled glass right now. So that's unfortunate. The other thing to remember with glass is it's made from sand. And so because of that, it's relatively inexpensive to make glass, which doesn't make it highly valuable and sought after. It does melt faster than if you were trying to make it from raw materials. And so there is a certain reason why they want broken glass in the mix. And the glass manufacturers will always tell you that they want the material. But it doesn't pay for itself for processing. So the other item that everybody thinks of as highly valuable and sought after is aluminum cans, and they are, because they are made from bauxite. And bauxite is a mineral that we pretty much used up all of our supply in the US back during World War II. And so we have to import it. It has to be mined, and then it has to be transported, and then it has to be melted down. And if you can use already made aluminum, it's going to lower all of those energy inputs. It's going to lower the cost to make it. It's even going to mean that your furnace doesn't have to burn quite as hot because you're not trying to melt as much bauxite because you already have it in there. So recovering it is very, very valuable. However, I will tell you that there isn't anybody out there, and there never has been, that's come to your door and knocked on it and said, hey, with my commercial truck and my CDL licensed driver, I'd like to take your aluminum for free. And the reason I tell you that is because aluminum still doesn't pay for the total cost of collection and sorting, and it's the most valuable item. And so there is a cost to provide these services. Even in the best of times, the best markets out there, there's still a cost to have a truck and a driver and somebody sorting all of this material and sending it to market. There's still costs there. So if you were to do a bale of just aluminum cans, it would be the most valuable bale you could do. However, the bauxite is in our aluminum foil and the bauxite is in our bakeware. And for many years now, we have said you can recycle those things as long as they're clean, okay? And with bakeware, I say that you don't want a lot of food on there, but there's a little bit of spaghetti sauce from, whatever. It's not the end of the world. It's still going to go into a 3,000 degree Fahrenheit furnace. But to get to that furnace, it has to go through a sorting facility, and they prefer no liquid sauces flying out all over their conveyor belts and onto the other items that they're trying to recycle. So baked on really hard, it's not as big an issue as obviously if something was liquid in there. So please keep that in mind when you're trying to recycle your aluminum. With steel, the great thing about steel is it is also infinitely recyclable. And you can pick up almost any steel object, from a toy to a soup can to a structural beam in a building, and it will have recycled content in it. And because of that, it's sought after. However, it comes from iron ore, which is abundant not only here, but globally. And so it competes on a global scale for the price that gets paid for it. And sometimes politics can enter into that. And so it's not the most valuable item by a long shot, but it's still highly recyclable, and it's still something we should value because we're taking a natural resource to make it. And that takes a lot of energy to even dig up the iron ore and melt it down. Paper, otherwise known as fiber. So I mentioned the newspapers. They've already kind of gone by the wayside. Back in the 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s, we were always marketing our paper as its own 2,000-pound bale. Nowadays, most of the paper mills that take the paper from our material recovery facilities, they allow newspaper into mixed bales of other residential mixes or hard mixes, soft, depends on the paper mill, what they'll call it, and how much they'll pay for it. But quite honestly, we just don't read the newspaper the way we used to. There isn't as much a demand for newspaper stock. And so that's all a contributing factor to the fluctuations in the paper market. On the plus side, we take a lot of paper products that we didn't used to take. Back in the day when this first, you couldn't do construction paper. You couldn't do envelopes with a window. Now you can do all of those things. You can do the chipboard, you can do corrugated. So we are taking a lot more paper products. And again, we just try to tell you, keep them clean. Okay, dry, clean is best. I want to mention cartons because they're a unique material. They are a fiber material. Think about your orange juice cartons and some of they come wine, other things comes in cartons. Laundry detergent I've seen in cartons. There's a lot of different products in cartons. And so they weren't initially taken, but there was an effort made by a group called the Carton Council, which is a bunch of manufacturers of cartons, where they actually gave grants to MRFs around the country to put in a line to separate the cartons from the rest of the fiber and to make a bale of only cartons. And they found paper mills that were willing to deal with this product and take it because it's a high quality paper, but it does have some coatings that have to be dealt with. And because they did that, they were able to nationally say, we can recycle cartons, and it was true. And I say that because there are other folks out there who might do a study in a lab. Think the K-Cup for Keurig, okay, I'm gonna pick on them. They came out and they told everybody, yeah, you can recycle these cups. It's not true. All right, first of all, a MRF has only a limited amount of space. So even to put a separate line in is difficult for them. All right, and then of course, the equipment, buying it, paying for, to market this material, getting enough of the material to make not only one bale, but you have to make a whole semi truck full of bales normally in order to market it to somebody. You're going to send them an entire truckload. So, I'm not suggesting everybody go out and use carrot cups. I'm actually suggesting the complete opposite. That company and the folks like them have not gone out and given grants to our MRFs. They have not tried to find MRFs that were able to take these, and there is no market for them right now. So it's great that in a lab you could show that you could sort them, but that doesn't mean that they're truly recyclable in the real world. Okay, so I'll get off my carton tangent and talk to you a little bit about plastics. So the plastics industry is completely different than the carton industry. From the get-go, practically, number 1 and number 2 plastic have been taken. So those are your soda pop bottles. If you look at the little chasing arrows on the bottom, they have little letters that stand for long chemical names. So PET and HDPE would be number 1 and number 2. And all of the other resins, of which there are 6 identified resins, and then there are 7th. So they only go up to number 7. And so those things actually were originally created not for you and I to look at and use to sort, but for the industry themselves as an internal way for them to be able to recycle non-post-consumer plastic items that maybe they had an overrun of or some other reason for recycling. And so that was actually how the resin code came into being. And it got adopted by all of us in the early education, but it was never intended that way. And we've actually moved a little bit away from that. But I will say, just for the record, that just this summer, there has been a big surge in demand for your milk jugs. They are considered a natural HDPE as opposed to a colored HDPE like a laundry detergent bottle. And there have been times this summer that they have actually gone higher than aluminum cans, which is just boggles my mind. But it's out there, it's happening. It's more of an anomaly. Most of the market is down for all the other plastics. Plastic number 5 has been kind of making a big showing the last few years. More and more products have been using number 5. I think a lot of shampoo bottles are number 5. So if you're looking through your refrigerator or your bathroom, you'll see some of these products. And if a MRF were to sort number 5 out, they could actually get a little bit better money than if they just mix it in with all the other plastics. But that will also lower the value on all those other plastics. And so many of the MRFs make a decision to just leave the number 5 in, and then the buyers of those bales want that number 5. They actually are looking for that more than the rest of the plastics. And that's something to just kind of keep in mind in the back of your head when you're looking at a product on a shelf. If you have a choice, you know, maybe choose, like an egg carton, you would choose to get it in the paper instead of the styrofoam if you can. And that we know the styrofoam is harder to recycle. Can't put that in a curbside bin, but you could put the fiberboard into the recycling bin. Another word on number 3 and number 4 plastics, while we're on this topic, is that number 3 plastic is normally not a bottle or a tub or a jug. It's actually usually PVC, like a plumbing pipe. Number 4 is quite commonly your plastic film, your plastic bags, okay? And so that's just not normally being used to make a container. So that's good. That means you're less likely to contaminate your recycling or find something that doesn't belong. Number 7 has the letters OTHER. That stands for other. It doesn't stand for a long chemical name at all. And it just means that number 7 containers, when you come across them, and you do, are actually made out of a combination of the first 6 resins that were identified, or of a brand new, recently invented resin that nobody's ever seen before. What happens with those is normally when they make it downstream, the processor that sends it there, the manufacturer is going to try to deal with it. They can use a water technique where they're floating and sinking the plastics. They cut them up, and based on that, that gives them a little more information on how to recycle that plastic better. And just keep in mind that every plastic has different melting points, different properties, and so there is a lot more to it than just saying, yeah, we'll just turn this into a new bottle. So anyway, lots of stuff on plastics. So number 1 mistake is a plastic mistake. The number 1 mistake across the board in Illinois and nationally is plastic bags getting put into the recycle bin. Sometimes it's as innocent as you used a plastic bag from the grocery store to throw your recyclables in, and you toss that into the cart. Okay. Other times you really thought you could take all those plastic bags from the grocery store and you could recycle them because you heard they're recyclable, so you could put those in the cart. In both those instances, those bags are going to cause problems to the material recovery facility. They are going to get tangled into the equipment. They're going to get dirty. They're going to have little bits of broken plastic and broken glass, broken plastic, little pieces of all kinds of stuff, paper in them. And when that happens, they are absolutely not recyclable. And so MRFs literally have to shut down in order to clean them off of their sorting equipment several times a day, the entire operation shutting down. That's very expensive. And then they throw all of that material away. In the case where you threw your good stuff in the plastic bag, depending on what's going on with the MRF and how much contamination they're having, they might just pull the whole plastic bag of stuff right off the conveyor belt, and then your good stuff that actually was recyclable doesn't actually even make it to the marketplace. Okay, so we don't want to have that happen. Just please tell your friends, tell your neighbors, don't put plastic bags in the cart at all. All right, now on the good news, these are totally recyclable. And what's really good is that when you go to the grocery store, you can usually take them right back. So I know during COVID, some of the bag collections went away, but a lot of them have come back. And I can tell you locally, the Jewel Osco has confirmed with us several times that they have not stopped taking them, that they are recycling them. Okay, and often what they're made into is plastic decking that will last for at least 50 years and never needs stained. So yay, we're actually taking something and using it in a really great sustainable way if we just get it into that recycling bin. And they do more than just your plastic bags. They'll do the film around your toilet paper. They'll do the film around your container of soda or something that comes in. So there's a lot more to plastic film. Your bread bag, okay, all of those different things can go in there with that grocery bag. And so go ahead and use your grocery stores and take it there. The next common mistake is scrap metal. And I mean, it's understandable, right? We're doing the aluminum, we're doing the steel. So why not go ahead and throw some torn screens or aluminum siding in there? You know, those recycling centers, they can do that. No, they can't. They can't. All right. It can cause problems on the conveyor belt. It can cut into them. It can get caught in equipment. It can literally damage the MRF. So we really don't want to see the scrap metal going in there. Now, the good news is that you can take that to scrap dealers. There are scrap dealers everywhere. Believe me, they not only predate World War II, they go back to the days when people were making swords and armor, okay? They wanted to use recycled metal. There were people going around and collecting it on carts with a horse. So you can recycle it, you just can't recycle it curbside. I can speak for ourselves. We try to offer at least 2 collections a year for residents who don't feel comfortable going to a scrapyard, and that's the picture you see there on the bottom is one of our scrap collections. So please feel free to check our websites in your area. Find, just go out and Google scrapyards near me, and you will find someone to take your scrap metal. So tanglers are a word that we like to use for anything that gets caught in that equipment at the MRF. And that can be outdoor hoses, electric cords, string lights, wires, hangers, ropes, chains, and more. And so we really don't want those things coming in to the recycling center. In some instances, you could donate some of those things. Some instances, you do have to send them to the landfill. String lights, we take readily with our electronics program year round, and we advertise it, of course, during the holiday season. And again, if it's a metal thing like the chains or the cords or the string lights, you can normally take it to a scrap dealer. So I've seen some super creative uses of garden hoses on Pinterest, all right? And kudos, I am simply not that creative, but I love seeing it. One of my favorites is they use glue, they tangled the whole thing up and they made it look like a potted plant kind of thing and use it as a planter. Another really cool thing is to puncture it numerous times and use it as an irrigation hose in your garden or in your flower bed. You can reuse them, but look, if you're not dedicated to doing those kinds of things, please don't put it in the recycling bin, just throw it away. And of course, away is our local landfills, so not really that far away. Batteries. Batteries are super confusing because the rechargeable batteries actually tell you to recycle them, but we never want to see batteries in the recycling bin. So yeah, definitely understand why folks are getting confused by that. The thing to remember with batteries is the rechargeable ones are actually hazardous. These single-use batteries are not. The value of the materials used in a single-use battery are extremely low, and they're heavy. So it's quite costly even to get them to somebody who will recycle them, and they charge you to do that. So it's an extremely expensive program to do. Most communities in Illinois are not offering single-use battery recycling. However, you can go in to Interstate Battery and you can go into Batteries Plus and you can ask them if they will do your single-use batteries because they both advertise that they will. I can't tell you I've followed them downstream to see what happens. I've heard that you could do this at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and they will also take your batteries. Here's the deal with them. They will recycle your rechargeable batteries. They actually do have collection containers. So do Ace Hardware stores. But if you have a clerk at one of those big box stores or Ace, take your single-use batteries. What I've been told by the managers of these stores is generally they're just being nice, and then they're throwing them in the garbage as soon as you walk away, or you don't even know what they did with them behind the counter. So I just caution you, if you have single-use batteries, you can just throw them away, or you can take them someplace where you really truly know that they're going to be recycled. Now, on that note, there are provinces in Canada and the state of Vermont that have laws that require the manufacturers of batteries to take back all batteries. And so we would love to see something like that happen in Illinois. And if you are of the same mind, let your legislators know. Let your county coordinators know. So they understand that would be something you'd like to see. So yeah, if you were in Vermont, you would actually be able to recycle all of your batteries in probably a box like we have pictured here. Now, these boxes exist at a lot of our libraries in our local area and at several of our county offices, and we will make sure that you have a way to recycle your rechargeable batteries if you stop in. So just something else to kind of keep in mind. Oh, and the other last note on batteries I should mention is use more rechargeable batteries and less single-use batteries whenever possible. Textiles is also a very, very common mistake. More and more people understand that they should be donating their textiles, and that when they donate them, they'll get reused or they'll get recycled. And they do get made into factory rags, they get made into insulation for homes, soundproofing for the cars underneath the hood and in the doors, so it's a quieter car. All of those can get, materials can be made from recycled textiles. So it's certainly something I understand why there's confusion on. However, at no time should you ever put any kind of clothing item or blanket or table linen or coat, what have you, into your curbside bin. You just absolutely should avoid that. And it's just going to end up going to the landfill. They're not going to be able to do anything with it at the MRF. And they could actually get tangled up with other things and consequently cause more items to get thrown away that could have actually gotten to market. So we really, really don't want you to do that. We do want you to take them to thrift stores or sell them at a garage sale, or maybe talk, to local shelters and Goodwills and things like that. We have once a year a week-long collection at the county, and that's the picture I have here. You can see it's just overflowing. This year, because of COVID, we actually did the entire thing out in our parking lot for the whole week, and we did a truck a day, and we did over 38,000 pounds of materials that didn't end up going to landfill, that all got reused or recycled. And it is a shame that 85% of our clothing ends up going to the landfill. We are a fast fashion society, and we need to kind of stop being that way. When you buy your clothes, look for something that isn't just trendy, but is actually something that's going to hold up over time. Try to make sure it's made out of a material that you really enjoy, you're going to wear over and over, and just, don't do the statistics where a lot of folks buy things and they only get worn 3 or 4 times, and then they get pitched. And it's a sad use of our resources to do that. So with that said, another common mistake is electronics. So around 2000, we started seeing electronics recycling events start to occur, and people got it into their head that they could recycle their electronics, and it was great. And by 2010, we had a state law in place that actually got the manufacturers to be responsible for some of the costs involved in electronic recycling. So that never meant you should put any electronic item in your curbside cart. Okay, at no time should you do that. We are not set up at MRFs to be taking electronic devices. And on top of it, a lot of them have batteries in them. So we've already said batteries are dangerous. And we shouldn't be sending them to a MRF. They can actually cause a fire when they hit the equipment, if I didn't mention that. I don't know if I mentioned that. but they can. There's been fires at material recovery facilities. Of course, then the whole facility can get shut down. So we really don't want batteries going in the curbside bin. And we also would prefer you take them out of the electronic equipment when you bring them to our drop-off sites. We in Will County have a front door service program. You do pay for that since they are coming to your front door. Normally it's $40 for a television set, doesn't matter what size, but they've come to your house, they'll take 7 additional items that are electronics at no additional cost. There's 17 items that are banned under Illinois law, but there's a whole bunch of additional items that aren't banned that are equally recyclable. My favorite one is microwaves, because those are heavy and totally recyclable, and other states did include them, but we did not. But even a cassette player, if it is just a cassette player and doesn't have a CD component, it's technically not banned, but it's equally recyclable. And so consequently, at our drop-off programs and in our front door service program, we take all of the items, even if they're not banned. We've even gone so far as to take things that are pretty much just electrical in nature and not electronic, like a power tool or a ceiling fan. So we try to be as helpful as we can to folks, and our motto has been that, we try to make electronic recycling easy in Will County. Now, I would say we're unique. I don't want to say that this is everywhere. So there are electronics recycling programs everywhere. Counties opt into them, and then they might have one-day collections, or they might have recurring collection events or permanent sites. And sometimes they may have to charge to cover the cost of the actual collection that they're doing. So yeah, we actually use our landfill tip fees to help us cover those costs. And to give you an idea of the wide array of collections that we have a site at the Lockport Public Works that's open every Tuesday and every Friday except holidays in the morning, and we take back the electronics there. There's a limit of 2 TVs, and this is true for all of our collections. We just recently partnered with the Park District in Bolingbrook to provide service there twice a month from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. In Peatone, we've been collecting from the Peatone Police Department's parking lot twice a month for several years now. Shanahan, we collect from their township twice a month. In Frankfurt, their township has partnered with us to offer the collection. In New Lenox, that township has also partnered with us the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. Wilmington's one of our more rural communities. We do once a month there, the second Thursday of each month. And Manhattan just joined us this year, and they are doing the fourth Thursday of each month at the township building there. We also have occasional Saturday collections for folks who don't find these hours to work for their schedules. And those are several a year. We're going to have one in September, we're going to have one in October, and we're working on one in November right now. We did have to cancel 2 events this past spring, unfortunately. One was on a school site and they didn't feel comfortable, and the other one was just really at the height of the lockdown, and we just didn't think it was sending the right message to hold the event. So, but generally speaking, we have plenty of opportunities to recycle electronics, and we think that it's highly valuable to do that. There are some rare earth materials in electronics, very small amounts, but still being rare earth and us having to import them from foreign nations that don't always get along with us, it's better to recover them than to send them to the landfill. So glad we have that law. One of the other really common problems in the curbside recycling program are items that we like to call yuck factor items. So think about your soda pop can that you didn't finish, it went flat, you don't like it, you throw the whole thing in, now there's soda all over everything, okay? You go into the pantry and you see some stuff that you're like, I'm never gonna eat that stuff. You know what, don't just take that full can and throw it in the recycling bin because it's a steel can. It's full of food. So look at the date, donate it if it's still usable. If it's past its date, then please, if you really want to recycle the can, open it up and get the food out. You can put it into your garbage disposal, you can put it into your compost, or, if need be, throw it into the garbage and then give us that empty can. All right, that's all we're asking. Don't give us yucky stuff. All right, now, This is going to sound so weird to anybody who's really been paying attention to recycling, but across the board, every MRF we talked to told us that they are getting dirty diapers. So we have been racking our brains to try to figure out why anyone would put a dirty diaper in the recycling program. And all we can come up with is the box that the diapers come in says that it's recyclable. The box, not the contents of the box, just the box, all right? And so maybe you're one of those parents of a newborn that's not getting any sleep, and you're just at your wit's end, not thinking things through, and poof, you're throwing the dirty diaper in the curbside bin. I don't know, but if you know any frazzled parents like that, please offer to babysit, offer to help them out, and tell them not to put diapers in the curbside bin. All right. And then one of the other really yucky things that happens is needles. All right. And here's the thing. Of course, nobody ever wants to get hit with a needle. All right. And there is a proper way to dispose of them. We even created a little infographic that we put on our Facebook page to help folks understand what to do. There are folks self-injecting, people with diabetes, people having hormone treatments, some people going through various illnesses have injectable medications in their home. And so they do question what's the best practice with their sharps, another word for needles. And so what we tell them in Illinois, while it's great if you can find a collection program for them, and the IEPA is actually working to roll out some collection programs for these, so please know that's on the horizon as well. The bottom line, they're not going to get recycled even in these special collection programs. So what you can do as a resident in Illinois currently is you can put them in a laundry detergent bottle. You want a really rigid, we used to say coffee cans, but something really thick plastic that they won't puncture through. And you can put them in there. Then you want to duct tape it, because duct tape solves everything. So just put them in there, put a piece of tape on there, say this is needles or sharps, however you want to label it, and then put it in with your garbage. Okay, it is actually illegal to put these materials in your recycling bin. And the reason you're labeling it is if some good Samaritan's walking by your curb, oh, they forgot to put that laundry detergent bottle in the recycling, I'll move it for them. So that's really the main reason. You don't want somebody going, well, let me help them out and recycle this, because you don't want it going to a MRF. All right. Now, this became a shock item for us in 1989, or 1990, oh my goodness, sorry, in 2018. In 2018, we said we're not taking shredded paper anymore. And we had been saying shredded paper was fine. Shredded paper is recyclable. However, when you throw it in with the rest of your stuff in the curb, it's going to get all tangled up with all the other materials that are in that truck. And when it gets to the MRF, if it's dry, it's going to be flaking off and falling off the conveyor belts and the different sorting equipment and ending up on the floor. If it's wet, it's actually going to get stuck to something else and be a contamination possibly. So the MRFs across the board said, please tell people not to send us their shredded paper. All right. Now, if you're somebody who really needs to shred your paper, you're very worried about identity theft, let me try to ease your worry a little bit by telling you that most identity theft occurs elsewhere, not at your curb. All right, it occurs when you're using your credit card. It occurs sometimes if you use an unsafe site for a purchase of something with your credit card online. And it can occur in the health industry with theft of health services. So it does occur. It is something we need to be vigilant about, but not usually at your curb. And so if you do have a credit card offer or a bank statement or some old tax information and you're really concerned and you do want to shred it yourself, please then bring that shredded material to an actual shredding event to get recycled, or find an alternative way to possibly try to recycle that, such as putting it into a compost where it can break down and just return as a fiber product and a nutrient to your compost or your garden. And then the other thing that is one of my favorite tips is to just tear stuff in half. I did not even use the electricity to run it through a shredder. Tear it in half where those numbers are, where your address is and your name, something, and then put half in one bag, half in the other. Put one bag out one week, put the other bag out the other week. Poof, nobody's ever putting this together. And the other thing you really, really should keep in mind is once it's picked up from the curb, once the driver takes it, and he's doing that with an automated system. He's not out there seeing what you put in there. And he's tipping it on a floor that's getting lifted up and down a conveyor belt. Everything's under surveillance. The tip floor is under surveillance. The conveyor belts are under surveillance. And they're flying by people, the people that are sorting things. They don't see that that's some kind of information that they could grab and actually utilize to go make some purchase. Okay, they're just seeing white paper, colored paper. That's all they're seeing. They're just, okay, what am I trying to pull out of here? And whatever their focus is, that's what they're doing. So they're not going to see anything and steal anything. So, and then it gets washed and all the ink gets washed off of it. So it's way better than sending it to the landfill. I do want to do a quick shout out to tires. Most people aren't throwing tires in their carts, but occasionally it does happen, and it's a concern. Tires are banned from Illinois landfill for very good reason. First of all, they cause problems in landfills. Air gets trapped in them and they make little tunnels in there and all kinds of silly stuff happens. And then, of course, they're a concern for mosquitoes. And because they're a wonderful nesting ground, breeding ground for mosquitoes, the state of Illinois says, hey, we're going to collect these fees on them, and we're going to use these fees to do mosquito abatement programs. Originally, years ago, the state would actually do tire collections for residents and try to get them to clean up tire piles. Now, since then, basically anybody who sells tires is supposed to take them back. They charge you a fee right when you buy a tire, so you're already paying the state fee when you buy a tire. But when you go in to recycle a tire, even if you're not buying one at the time, you will pay a fee to have it recycled. The smaller the tire, an automobile tire versus a truck tire, the cheaper the fee is going to be. But you do need to be aware of that. Even with that, it's a pretty nominal fee, $2, $2.50, $3.50, depending on the size, for a tire to get recycled. So if you do have any on your property, get them off of there. Don't let the mosquitoes breed on them, and do the proper thing and get them recycled. Retread tires, which are used by UPS and lots of other businesses that rely on, they 75% of a retread tire is recycled content. Running tracks at schools, playgrounds, even Arlington Racetrack has recycled tires in there. They give a lot of push to the track, and so that's easier on the horses' knees. It's easier on playgrounds when kids go flying off the swings and stuff. So anyway, there are markets for it, but you do have to recycle it by cutting the steel belts out of it, and that's expensive. So anyway, just a little bit on tires. Now, pizza boxes, we all have them, and most of us aren't sure what to do with them. We've gotten so many different messages over the years, and this just came to light about 2 months ago. A study came out and really got everybody's attention because it said, hey, a couple of paper mills said pizza boxes are okay, and you don't have to worry about grease and cheese and vegetables being on the pizza box anymore. Just throw the whole pizza box in, empty the pizza out, but throw the rest of it in, doesn't matter. And we said, really? And we reached out to the MRFs and we asked for their information, and we also looked at the study. And what we found was that it was a small number of paper mills, not all the paper mills that MRFs market to. They were dealing with the material as it was coming in under existing education. Existing under education is across the board. There are collections that don't allow any pizza boxes, period, in them because they don't want the contaminated ones. There are collections that say if it's clean, like the box on the right, it's fine to recycle. And there are collections that say no grease at all. And in this particular instance, in this picture, you could cut off the tops of these and you could recycle the tops, but nothing else. All right. So the good news from that study is it sounds like the box on the right is okay. primo okay. If a MRF is willing to take it, then you're good to go. They have a market that will take pizza boxes. But just really at this point, if you're seriously in doubt, send it to the landfill or tear it up, compost it, okay? It's totally compostable. Now, another thing that's generated confusion is this message about boxes that we would put into a refrigerator or a freezer. And are they truly recyclable? Because a lot of times they will have a little bit of a coating on them or a really thick coating. And so how do we know what we can and can't recycle? So in talking to various MRFs around the state, I have found that if you're talking about commercial beer boxes, like we see here on the left, they have a very, very thick coating of wax, and no one wants them, okay? So unless you have some way of reusing them, or you have little kids that want to make forts out of them or something, really seriously, they are destined for the landfill, unfortunately. Cartons that ice cream or frozen yogurt and things like that come in are also something that we find are hard to recycle. Now, I will tell you that in Michigan, they are saying that they have paper mills that are able to take those. So even as I say this and tell you that across the board in Illinois, we're not taking them, it's not to say that that won't change in the future. But for now, throw those away. That's the bottom line. We've already talked about the gable top cartons. So I just throw them in here because of course they're kind of part of what we're talking about, but they are a slightly different material. And then I threw up one of my favorites, which is those single-use boxes that we see a lot of. And even you can get a family meal in a chipboard box that's in the freezer, like a frozen lasagna. Okay. And so when you see those things across the board, MRFs are able to take those, market those with their chipboard. So yes, they do have a coating to them, but it's not so detrimental that it can't be recycled. So that's pretty much the message on those. Now I've thrown out a lot of yeses and nos to you, and I understand if it's gotten overwhelming. So I want to draw your attention to the poster that we released at the end of 2018 for America Recycles Day. This poster is on numerous websites around the state, including Will County Green, right on our front page. You could click on it, you could print it out if you wanted it as a memory for some reason, or just know you can go there. It's also on the state of Illinois' website. And the Illinois EPA did a really great thing. Beyond this poster, they also have all these different items and more that you can click on and learn more about. Okay, can I recycle the toilet paper roll? Yes, you can. Okay, do I leave caps on or caps off? Put the caps back on the plastic. Okay, if they're big, wide caps, like a peanut butter jar, it's not going to be as important, but those little tiny caps will never make it through the sorting process. They'll fall off the conveyor belts. You got to try and put those back on if you want them to have any chance of being recycled. Okay, but in any event, all of that information, you can go to their website, you can go to our website, and go to your county's website, because I know some of you aren't from Will County, and you'll find this information. So please feel free to do that. Let's see. My little tiny tidbit about COVID. So when everybody got locked down, the businesses stopped providing a lot of cardboard. But residents started getting all of their deliveries in cardboard, more than they ever had before. So the price of cardboard actually went way up, demand for cardboard, things like that. Since then, things have settled down. Businesses have reopened to some extent, even though still lots of us, including myself, are working from home, as you can tell from my lovely background. And so, basically, as far as the impact from COVID, it's been relatively minor in the big scheme of things. To the recycling, the really important takeaway I found was that these things were considered essential services, recycling, not just waste hauling. There was a push, there was a fear at the time that a lot of the drivers or folks who work in the MRFs would get the virus, they would have to shut down. things wouldn't be able to move, and they were talking about trying to landfill recyclables, trying to landfill landscape materials. There was a pushback against that. There was a group of us that were meeting regularly, talking about how were things going, and we found that, luckily, thankfully, this was not the case, that the virus did not cause a shortage of drivers, it did not cause a shortage of workers at the MRFs, and so we were able to continue to provide all the services throughout the worst of the COVID phases that we were in, okay? And I know a lot of times people don't realize that we're having these conversations trying to make sure services are intact for residents as much as possible. I mentioned the commercial recycling, and I also wanted to just add that if you're a business that gets a lot of cardboard, which a lot of businesses do, you can bale your own cardboard. You can sell that cardboard when it's baled a lot of times because you've taken that extra step, okay? You can have collection of yours materials, and depending on how homogeneous the materials are that you recycle, you can get really lower pricing for that service. You're still gonna pay for that additional service in most instances if you're not baling it actively. So it is something that a lot of businesses try to do. Grease, restaurants are very good at recycling their grease. We certainly don't want it to ever go down a drain, but that same restaurant or bar will have a horrible time trying to get service for their glass. Again, that goes back to the value of glass and the trouble that it can cause for a MRF. And so it's very unusual to find a restaurant or a bar that's able to recycle their glass. And if they can, a lot of times they have made enough room in the back of house to sort their glass by color and make it a little bit clean. It's obviously very clean and sorted by color, so it's more valuable. So most restaurants and bars don't have enough room to do that kind of thing. So again, that's why it's more rare, unfortunately. Office buildings, they generate far more fiber than they would the other materials we're talking about, but they'll have chipboard, they'll have cardboard. And so those of us who are confused about what we can and can't recycle at home, and we walk into an office and we try to recycle at the office, tend to stay confused. So if we're making these mistakes at home, we're probably making the mistakes at the office, and that's something to just kind of keep in mind. So if you're back at work, share some of this information with coworkers, what you can and really can't recycle. And so I already mentioned a little bit on the COVID and the impact that it had on the cardboard market. I would also mention that it had an impact on aluminum cans. We don't have the mass get-togethers that we were having, and consequently, we're not having, everybody's not partying, whether that's college campuses or it's at sports events. Or it's a graduation ceremony, as we all know how that went. And so you don't have as much beverage can consumption, which is part of the reason the aluminum cans are down and probably part of the reason why the milk jugs are up. I'm just speculating on that one, but kind of goes with the idea that we've learned that they're not being consumed nearly as much, okay? And the steel markets, as I mentioned, are not changing because of COVID. They're more impacted by the global economic situation and politics. So just to kind of give you an idea, it's not that we recycle because of how valuable an item is. That was never what started recycling back in the 70s and the 80s. People recycled because they recognized the inherent value of our resources, and we don't want to run out of them. And they made a decision in the 80s and the 90s and today to actually pay to have things recycled rather than let them fill up landfills and devalue our natural resources. And so I just throw that out there because there's still a lot of folks out there that think recycling can just pay for itself, and it never really could. And certainly, given the market fluctuations we've seen, it certainly can't right now. So, looking to the future, I just wanted to tell you that if anything, we know change will continue to happen as it's happened all these years. And because we know that, we also know that innovation will occur, just as we didn't have cell phones when curbside programs started, and even think about electronic recycling. Nowadays, we don't really think about not recycling our televisions. So it's definitely something that's always changing, always moving. And so even though we've taken a little bit of a step back, we're going to continue to move forward. And there'll be more market development. And I think that we should be positive. So the last thing I want to leave you with is this trends that we should be watching. And you remember I mentioned some of the phrases that were coming out in the 2000s, and those are still around and still developing. So that zero waste concept, more and more states, more and more businesses are striving for this zero waste concept. Now, it really doesn't mean zero waste, it's 90%, but wow, when you consider that most of us are getting 35 to 40% diversion, the idea of 90% diversion is phenomenal. And certainly will make our landfills last longer and our resources get used more. Food scrap composting. We have identified food scraps as one of the #1 things that go to landfill that really shouldn't. We need to learn how to use our money wisely when we're buying food. We need to learn to eat what we make, to utilize our leftovers, to compost our food scraps when possible. And then electronic recycling, we certainly have spent some time on that one. And so that's going to continue evolving. There's new electronic products being created all the time. They're not currently banned. The manufacturers aren't currently paying for them to be recycled. We want to address that. We want to come back and say, hey, can you guys do more things for us? The construction and demolition industry is always evolving, and that includes carpet recycling. And so wood can be recycled, stone, bricks, drywall can be recycled, and carpet can be recycled. And there's legislation right now at the state trying to make sure that carpet can get recycled far more easily with manufacturer support in Illinois. So our legislature, because of COVID, kind of came to a little bit of a halt this year, and we don't think it's going to pass in veto session this fall, but we still, are keeping our fingers crossed and watching it to see. But yeah, that's our hope. If it doesn't, then we'll be right back in the spring with that. Paint recycling. There's a bunch of us that see all this paint coming in. Will County takes latex paint as part of our household hazardous waste collection. A lot of other communities don't. The regional household hazardous waste collections don't. But latex paint is recyclable. And so we want to make sure that we're collecting it. It's one of the #1 calls we get at the county is, what do I do with my paint? So we have been talking to the American Coatings Association, and they are ready to partner with us on a bill this spring to try to see paint recycling get widespread, have retailers take it back for us, so it's a lot easier for us to actually get rid of that paint in our basements. Mattress recycling, our university towns love to talk to us about when are we going to address mattress recycling. And I do get calls about it occasionally. So I know there's a need out there. Hotels, B&Bs, and obviously college dorms have to be changing out those mattresses quite regularly, and it would be better if we could recover the cotton and the metal springs and the other materials that are in there and recycle it than just send it to the landfill to take up space. The other big thing is the circular economy. Designing the products to be more durable, designing them to include recycled content, designing them to be repairable, designing them to be more easily recycled and taken apart at the end of their life so that they can become feedstock into the next products that they become. Very important. And it's something that's being pursued quite actively in Europe and in Canada. And we believe that it's going to be coming, or actually already started kind of coming here, but not as easily seen as it is in Canada, parts of Canada and in Europe. So pulling the manufacturers into this process is really important. And that's pretty much it for me today. I'll just leave you with, just because this is the end, it doesn't mean that it's just the beginning when you're talking about recycling. And Jamie, if you want to help me with what's in the chat,
Absolutely, Marta. We've got some really great questions here that have come in. So I know we're a little bit over time, but that's all right. There's so much really great information here. So I'm just going to throw questions at you, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Excellent.
All right. First of all, David would like to know, are the hefty clear and blue recycling bags a problem for the MRFs?
Any plastic bags tend to be a problem for the MRFs. The only thing that I would tell you is a little confusing still is that they are not consistent in telling commercial businesses that might use a big plastic bag when their cleaning services come through and gather recycling, not to put those into the dumpster. But they have consistently told us to use educational materials that show somebody emptying the plastic bag and letting everything kind of fall into your cart. And so if you can instruct your cleaning services to do that at a business, that would be better than throwing that hefty bag into the commercial dumpster.
What about glass bottles with metal caps like Snapple bottles?
So, you know, the nice thing about a steel, it's magnetic. So the Snapple bottle example is probably going to make it up the conveyor belt to the magnet and get grabbed that way. But in general, smaller lids, they always say put them back on because they tend to just fall through the openings and things like that when things are getting
jars, things like that too.
Pardon?
Leave the lids off. So like a pickle jar, for example.
Oh yeah, pickle jar is a nice wide lid. You could leave that off. Yeah. Okay. I will tell you, personally speaking, I put the lids back on everything just because it's a habit. And so then I don't forget to put the lid back on something that really needs the lid put back on.
And that would go for things like the Tetra Packs, the cartons of chicken broth and orange juice, those things, those plastic lids, leave those on as well.
Right.
Okay. Patty wants to know, how about hangers? Can hangers be recycled?
At the scrap metal recycler, but not in the curbside. They can puncture conveyor belts. They can get twisted and tangled just like a plastic bag because of the way that it goes across the equipment when they're trying to sort things. And it can actually injure a person because they can become unstraightened out instead of in that form, and then they're sharp. So yeah, they really don't want hangers.
Richard wants to know, jeans and t-shirts that are obviously torn, stained, shouldn't be for resale. Is there a place to take those?
Yes, Will County has partnered with Goodwill, with Savers, with St. Vincent de Paul. Every single one of these large companies or nonprofits that takes back textiles has to send literally truckloads of things they can't market to places to recycle them. So absolutely donate them to any of the folks I just mentioned. They normally will tell you that they want nice stuff because that's how they actually can make money, but they can handle the stuff that's not so nice.
Fairly certain too, my mom volunteers with Together We Cope, which is an agency that helps to prevent homelessness, but they have a resale shop as well. And she said anything that, any of the clothing they get in that they can't put out for sale, they can actually bale it and sell it to somebody who turns them into rags and does other kinds of recycling things. So they do get money for them still. So even if stuff's not wearable, that agency can still get money back from that too. So incandescent light bulbs, fluorescent bulbs, LEDs.
Yes, so incandescent bulbs, you still need to throw those away, at least in our area. I have heard of some folks trying to recycle them, but I don't know anybody. You know, if you guys find somebody, feel free to send them to me. But LEDs, CFLs, we take back, and the tube lights, the fluorescent tube lights at our household hazardous waste collections. The CFLs, Ace Hardware takes them, and Home Depot, and I think Lowe's takes those. Those are the little twisty ones.
Yeah. Someone else said, I was told the paper egg carton shouldn't be recycled because the fibers are too short. Now, and I've heard similar about paper towels and things like that as well. Is that correct, or?
Well, we always say no to the paper towels, but no, the egg cartons are still acceptable. Yeah, their fibers are a little shorter, but so are several other products. Construction paper, we take that, and that's got some shorter fibers in it.
Okay. All right. Couple of questions about cardboard boxes. So if you've got cardboard boxes that have tape or labels on them, do you have to take the tape off, or can you just throw it all in together?
If it had a huge amount of tape, like somebody was really afraid this box would fall apart and just went to town on it, you might want to take some off. But generally, no, it's not a problem to have some tape on the seams. That's not going to be a big deal.
And what about the bubble wrap mailers?
Oh, I thank you for bringing that up. They can actually, if it's just plain bubble wrap, not the mailer, but just the plain bubble wrap, they can go in with your plastic bags at the grocery stores. Okay. Now, if it's a mailer where it's been glued to the inside of a chipboard or a paper envelope, that needs to go into the garbage.
I was thinking like like if I get something small from Amazon, say, there's the whole mailer itself is like just bubble wrap, effectively, like that's been sealed. It's a little bit reinforced, I guess, on the outside or something. It's plasticky.
But it doesn't have paper glued to it in any way.
No paper. It's just all like bubble wrappy stuff.
That should be fine. That should be fine then, yeah.
Very cool. Let's see. How about athletic shoes?
We take all types of shoes. In fact, our very first textile collection, which was in 2005, was just gym shoes. That was the very first collection. And then over the years it evolved that we went to all shoes, and then eventually we started adding all the clothing.
Let's see. Leah, I'm not entirely certain we have, we'll take the second part of your question. Can the lawn waste bin handle food scrap waste?
So technically a small amount of food scrap could go in, but the companies that haul it can actually put into a contract that it says no food scraps, because they may be restricted on how much food scrap can be taken at a compost site. So compost sites in general in the state of Illinois are allowed to have a small amount of food scraps coming in, but they have to actually get a secondary permit if they actually want to attract food scraps to their compost site. And that's kind of the problem. So check with your local municipality or your hauler and see what they say. Yeah, if it was just a little tiny bit, I wouldn't get too excited about it, honestly.
And I think you bring up a really good point there, that with a lot of these, check with your hauler. I know when I had questions about whether, this was several years ago, whether I could recycle anything other than 1 and 2 plastics, because that's what I'd been taught since, the early 90s. I called them and said, hey, what plastics can I put in there? And they said, well, where are you calling from? And I told them, and they said, whoa, yeah, actually you can do everything but 6. It's like, oh, okay, very cool. And now you have it straight from the horse's mouth. They can answer these questions for you. They're very friendly and easy to talk to, and just give them a call and ask, hey, can I recycle this? Can I throw this in my curbside bin? And they'll say yes or no, and maybe have other information for you too.
I would only have one caveat, and that is sometimes they will, like we had one of the MRFs that wanted to say only aluminum cans and no more bakeware and no more foil. And the reason is the value of the material more than the recyclability of the material.
Okay.
Wasn't because he couldn't market the bale with the other items in it. It wasn't a market situation. So yeah, you can always call your hauler and always check with your municipality. And remember that your municipality is the one that was driving that contract. And so if you find information that you don't think is the way it should be, then you want to talk to your municipality that actually created that contract and see what they can do.
Next up, how about styrofoam? Is there any place to recycle styrofoam?
So we were partnering with a company called Dart and doing a twice-a-year collection as part of what we called our Recycle-Palooza. We do not have a permanent site in Will County for styrofoam currently. There are very few around the state. However, the company Dart has offices in North Aurora, and so that's Kane County, right next door to us. If you want to go there 24 hours, 7 days a week, that facility allows people to drop off clean styrofoam. Now, they don't like the black foam, and they don't want foam that's been glued. So if it's been, glued to a box or something when you got a shipment, you can't recycle that. But if it's just something you peeled off of a television set or some other item, then, absolutely, they will take that. They'll take your empty meat tray. Just please rinse it off. Don't bring it with the meat juice on it. Or your cups. So any of those things, they do take those. And again, rinse that out.
Styrofoam is number 6 because that was another question too. So
it is. Yeah.
And yes, Eve, MRF, a MRF is Materials Recovery Facility.
Yes.
Let's see. Are compost curbside bins coming?
There's been a few communities that have rolled them out. We have not had anybody, I believe, other than Naperville, that has it as an option, and it's, from what I understand, pretty pricey. So I don't know how many people have actually subscribed to it. But yes, there are curbside collection containers for food scraps.
There's one
I would rather see a program where you were allowed to put it in with your yard waste. But in the wintertime, when you don't have yard waste, having that container is a nice thing too. So.
There is a program like that. I was recently at, it was one of Schmeck's events, and they were talking about, I want to say it was like maybe Oak Park has a curbside composting program. It was really cool. And it was, who was it?
Oak Park, they were the first.
Yeah. And so they actually had a couple of people from the municipality there, and they were talking about it, and it sounds like a really great program. And it was just like you were saying, where it's food scraps as well as yard waste. And it was even to the point where like neighbors could share it if they didn't have a lot, so they were talking about all these really great ways to get a lot of people involved in it. It seemed to be fairly easy to do. And it seemed like it was working out very well for them. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come.
Yes, it's just a little costly right now. But yes, we do need to buy more compost that's made with food scraps. It's higher in nutrients. And
yeah, there you go.
The demand for that, then the easier it's going to be able to afford to add it to a curbside program.
How about scrap wood, like lumber and wood furniture?
Yeah, so the lumber definitely is recyclable through construction and demolition recyclers. So you want to look for those. We list them on our website, or you could just plug it into Google if you want to and find them. There's a company called Lakeshore Recycling that's very active in doing construction and demolition, but there's some other ones out there too. When it comes to the wood furniture, I always recommend Restore first. They try to reuse furniture. And then they're more likely, if they've taken it and they accept it from you, to be able to find a market for it if they can't sell it as just the wood. But, that and Goodwill takes furniture too as well. So, yeah.
And while we're on the topic of construction, one participant said that we took down a small brick wall. We can use the bricks and have a wheelbarrow filled with used mortar. We don't want to put the mortar in the garbage, but don't know who can take it. We tried our village thinking it could be used for filling roads, but they said no other ideas. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's a new one, mortar. I
hadn't heard that one either.
Yeah, I can tell you I've had people call with broken concrete, and if you're willing to take it to concrete mixing folks, you can call them. Always call first. Don't just show up and say, please take this from me. They might take it. They normally are geared to B2B. They're doing business to business transactions with large amounts. Somebody tears up a road and has broken concrete. They'll be bringing it over, and then they can recycle that. That would be the best bet that I could tell you, though. Somebody who's involved in making concrete and seeing if they would take it from you. But you'd have to bring it to them. Nobody's going to come pick that up.
Let's talk about schools for a minute. Leah wants to know why schools aren't getting kids to recycle milk cartons and other lunchroom items.
So We have an educator at Will County, Joan O'Keefe, and she will tell you all kinds of reasons she's encountered for this. But the main thing that at least she's conveyed to me is when there's large amounts of the cartons and the school isn't really pushing the kids to empty them, it becomes very problematic. You remember I mentioned the yuck factor. So if you've got milk cartons that weren't emptied and they're piling up for several days, we won't even say a week, we all know that's not going to be pleasant. And it can actually deteriorate the carton, so then nobody really wants to handle it. And so they tend to be a little picky. The school district has to make a concerted effort to create a table with a couple of containers near it where they can pour off their materials, or set everything up by a sink somewhere, depending on the type of school it is and their cafeteria stations. But yeah, you really have to educate the kids to pour that stuff out.
Yeah, I know, and it's difficult. It's difficult enough to get adults to do it right. It can be even harder to get kids doing it right as well, especially when they only have maybe 20 minutes to eat their lunch, throw everything away, and get back to class. So,
which is why they're not finishing their milk to begin with.
Right, exactly. Susan wants to know where she could recycle cork.
Oh, so Earth 911 does some really weird stuff. Now, sometimes you have to pay them to do different things, but they are a great resource for some really weird things. They've done cigarette butts, they just all kinds of crazy materials. So not Earth 111, sorry, TerraCycle.
TerraCycle, yeah, okay.
Might have information. Sorry, TerraCycle is the recycler. They were started by a gentleman in New Jersey when he was in college, and really innovative. And what they'll do is they will get companies that actually produce some of the materials to help fund the recycling efforts, and then they can roll it out, usually to schools. They'll roll it out, but they might let residents, depending on the program, also participate. But again, you might have to incur the cost of mailing it to them and find out whether they have any fees associated with being able to do it. The other thing to do is keep in mind that people are hobbyists. And so you could put this out on FreeCycle. You could put this out on Facebook Marketplace and say, hey, I have 50 corks. Does anybody want them? And you know, it's crazy. People will come. They will get them. You know, there's craft people. There's all kinds of folks who can use those.
A old bulletin board out of old corks.
Exactly.
I don't have a problem. I promise. It was over many, many years. We collected enough finally.
No judge.
Yeah. And it's a small little cork board, but you know, it's kind of cool because there were some bottles in there that were special, you know, that we opened for an anniversary, or we took a trip to California. And so we have these corks. And so it was kind of cool to put them into this, this board. So you've got all the interesting little images that are on some of the corks too. And it was pretty cool. Cork is also compostable. So if you've got a home compost system, along with, as you mentioned earlier, your shredded paper too, that can all go in there too. If you're interested in learning more about starting a home compost, I did a whole webinar on that as well. Check out our YouTube channel. There's a lot more information on there about how you can start your own compost bin. Okay, and TerraCycle is just, I think it's TerraCyle, right?
2 R's.
2 R's.
2 R's.
So yeah, TerraCyle, TerraCycle. And they do chip bags and things like that. Normally you have to have a larger quantity of things like that before you can send them in. You can't just send in like 3 chip bags to them. So that's why it's a better option for schools or restaurants or places that tend to do more volume of that kind of stuff. Screw tops back on the wine bottles. Speaking of wine.
I do. I will tell you that they're not always steel, so they're not going to get caught by the magnet. So when they're going through that polishing stage, if they made it all the way through, at some point then they're going to end up going to that secondary processor, or they're going to get caught by the primary, the MRF in that polishing. But they will get recycled. if you put them back on.
Labels are good on both glass and plastic.
Yeah,
Correct.
you know, years ago, I didn't mention that in the history lessons, when we first started all these programs in the 80s, the education and even early 90s was, oh, you had to peel the label off, you had to wash everything thoroughly. We do want you to wipe things out. We don't want you to run to waste a lot of water trying to wash things thoroughly. You know, wipe out a peanut butter jar, certainly, you know, we just want to make sure that things aren't going to cause a lot of problems down the line with contamination.
Just a couple more here, and then I think we got to wrap this up. One was a question about the electronics recycling sites. Are you required to live in Will County for those?
So we call it the Will County area. There is a requirement, but I will tell you that if your city has just a tiny footprint in Will County, then you're welcome to come. So all residents of Orland Park, all residents of Naperville, all residents of Mokina, okay, Coal City. I'm trying to go around the edges of the
Side edge, yeah.
yeah, so like really seriously, we don't worry about where the county line is in your town. We don't care. It's just, yeah, if your town has a little tiny bit in Will County, then you're included in our solid waste programs. That is not the same for health department programs, but it's absolutely true for our solid waste programs, for our recycling programs.
And then finally, last question here, and this is the last question we're going to answer live. If you have other questions that we weren't able to get to, Marta has her email address there. My email address was attached to the confirmation that you get, so feel free to drop me a line too. I'm happy to look up any information on that I can for you. Melanie says, my fitness center has a brown recycling box where we deposit batteries. I'm assuming these actually get recycled. What should we do with button batteries?
Same place, unless they tell you no. Yeah.
Okay.
If they're taking single-use batteries, then the button batteries can go right in there with them. Great.
Okay. Is there anywhere else to take button batteries, or are they just, you just toss them?
No, the only weird battery is a lithium battery. So there's single-use lithiums and there's rechargeable lithiums. Lithiums are the one battery that's been the most connected to the fires that I was talking about.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So we've been allowing single-use lithiums in our rechargeable battery boxes without any concern. But we generally, of course, have to say no to the single-use batteries. The program will become way too expensive for us to do. So yeah, that's the button batteries are not hazardous. They were the last battery to become non-hazardous. So that might also be something that, you know, maybe people are still aware of. And I have a cohort in the office, Dave Hartke, who is a project manager for our household hazardous waste. He literally, during the winter, took a bunch of batteries from our fall collections that were button batteries. He looked up every single little code. If you ever look at them, I mean, it's minuscule on there, okay? God love him. All right, he's younger than me. So seriously, God love him though. And he typed in those numbers into something where you could look it up. And every single battery that had come in our fall collections that was a button battery was non-hazardous. And so we felt really secure telling people they are not hazardous anymore.
And I know I said that was the last one, but there's one more because I'm a child of the 80s and I have to ask this one. What about the plastic rings that soda cans come in? Can those be recycled, or do we need to cut the rings and throw them away to prevent animals from getting caught in them?
Okay, you know, it's funny, my daughter just mentioned that to me yesterday. So, you know, they should pull apart very easily now with your hands, not like they used to. But yeah, if you want to cut them, because you don't always know they're going to get where they're supposed to be, you can put them in with the plastic bags at the grocery store. There was a point back in the late 80s and early 90s where there were some communities that were taking them. That's all gone away. And again, probably because they would become tangled on equipment. But take them to the grocery store with you and recycle them there. And if you are just going to throw them in a trash can, keep in mind that they're lightweight and they can blow. And so obviously cutting them is a great thing. And also a really good thing is they supposedly, and I can't speak for all manufacturers, but the manufacturer in Illinois changed the way they make them so that with being exposed to sunlight, they will break down, so they won't choke animals.
All right, we are way over time. Thank you so much to those of you who stuck with us through all of this. But I love this information, and Marta is so full of information. She will tell you I pump her for questions every time I see her. So thank you so much for taking your time today to answer all of our questions and to go through all of this really informative information. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everybody for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free, drop either one of us an email. We're happy to take your questions. And with that, have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you all back next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.